My name is Marco Castillo, English language teacher and academic at Universidad Católica Silvio Enríquez. This presentation is on how to teach reading in an English as a foreign language classroom. Let's begin. Two chapters were used to construct this presentation, which are available to you in the references list at the end and on our learning platform. Let's start by defining what is reading. It is one of the four language skills together with writing, listening, and speaking. It is a receptive skill, like listening. It involves responding to input text rather than producing it. In other words, it is a skill in charge of making sense written text. To do this, we need to understand the language of the text at the word level, sentence level, or whole text level. We also need to connect the message of the text to our knowledge of the world. For example, let's see the following sentence. The mother was surprised because her 3-year-old girl was able to read some words. To understand this sentence, we need to process letters, how to join letters to make up words, the meaning of those words, the grammar governing the sentence construction. The line alludes to a person, the mother of a young girl, who was surprised. Readers of this sentence and the mother herself know that, on average, most children learn to read between the ages of 6 or 7. Some learn at 4 or 5. This is known as the knowledge of the world. The example is useful as it shows, on the one hand, that reading is an interactive process. This means readers struggle to make sense of a text, to either construct a personal interpretation or to understand the author's original intentions. But the example is also useful as it shows the types of knowledge often used to decode what a written piece of text says. These are the 6 types of knowledge our brain deals with when reading. The first 2 are related to the system of a language, syntactic and morphological knowledge. The other 4 types of knowledge are those in charge of providing further context that enable readers to work out the meaning of a piece of text. This is known as a schematic knowledge. How do we teach how to read? There are 3 stages. One, in which teachers recognize the importance of students' previous knowledge on the topic to be read about. This is the pre-reading stage. In it, teachers deal with students' schematic knowledge that is connected to the text that will be introduced in the next stage while reading. Students' understanding of the world and of the topic that is contained in the text are activated by means of elicitation, brainstorming, questions and answers, and guessing games and other strategies. The second stage is for students to read and stay as active readers in the process. In doing so, some activities need to be deployed for them to analyze the text. This is the while reading stage. Examples of activities in this stage are reading for gist or skimming. This is done to obtain global understanding of the text. Reading for detail, which involves getting the meaning not only of every word or sentence unit, but also intentions or ideas that are implied behind those words. Finally, the stage that makes use of what students have read in a meaningful way, the post-reading stage. In here, it is expected that activities are somehow tied up to the text they read in the previous stage, and at the same time, students used the knowledge obtained to reflect on the topic, discussing the author's opinion and their own, critiquing and personalizing the text with questions like, what do you think? What would you have done instead? Create an alternative ending to the story, etc. Why are the 3 stages mentioned before important? About pre-reading activities. Some findings indicate that more information is retrieved and stored in people's minds when schematic knowledge is used to activate prior knowledge, thus enabling readers to easily remember words, ideas associated to a piece of text, etc. Some ideas you may consider when designing at this stage include predictions and pre-teaching of vocabulary, asking students to look at the title of the text and guess what they are going to read next, or asking them to connect the images of a text together with words that need some teaching are normal teaching practices for language teachers. Some other activities may require students' understanding of the world and of the topic that is contained in the text by means of elicitation, class or groups brainstorming, questions and answers, and guessing games. About while reading activities. During this stage, students are asked to remain active readers, and in doing so, their understanding of the text will be tested. Some activities to consider in this stage are listed below. 1. Skimming. It is a type of sub-skill to check or read for global understanding of an entire piece of text. It involves glancing through a text to get a general idea of what it is about. For example, you usually skim when you look quickly through a book in a bookshop to decide if you want to buy it, or when you look at a menu to decide what to eat. 2. Scanning. When we scan, we don't read the whole text. We glance over most of it until we find information we are interested in. For example, you normally scan through a text to find the number of a restaurant on a website, or when you are going through a grammar book to find the grammar rule you need to study before an exam. 3. Reading intensively. This type of reading involves reading for detail, obtaining the meaning of every word, and out of the links of relationships between words and between sentences. For example, you normally read like this when you're reading an email or message of someone you love who you haven't heard of for a long time. Students normally read like this at exams too. 4. Reading extensively. This involves reading long pieces of text and is normally done for pleasure. For example, a story, an article, or a novel. Your attention and interest vary. You may read some parts of the text in detail while you may skim through others, so you might use the variety of reading skills. About post-reading activities. Teaching materials should allow space to do something with the knowledge students have gained after reading. In real life, we often read to do something else as a consequence to the act of reading. For example, we normally read emails or WhatsApp messages to later respond to them. We also read the news to be discussed or commented with someone else. We sometimes read recipes because we want to make and eat a pie. But reading is also a critical process because texts are sometimes constructed in order to shape readers' perceptions. Why? Well, because writing is a tool of power. Reading activities then need to allow space for critical reflective thinking, discussion, critiquing, etc., that can enable readers to notice the subtleties that may affect their thinking, values, beliefs, and understanding of the world of other people. Post-reading activities, types of activities. Discussions for reflections, whether orally or written, are to be allowed, but also producing language and products. On the left hand of this table, you see some while reading activities. For example, reading invitations, reading a letter of recommendation, reading a recipe, or reading a story. As post-reading activities, you can see their follow-up activities. For example, for reading invitations, you have writing an acceptance or rejection message. If the task during the while reading activity was to read a letter of recommendation, then maybe as a post-reading one, you may want your students to role play a telephone call to arrange a job interview. If the while reading activity was reading a recipe, maybe the post-reading activity Maybe making the recipe you read with your students, or ask them to write another recipe. Even, you may want to include speaking about students' favorite food and their recipes. Finally, if the while reading activity was to read a story, as a post-reading activity, you may want your students to draw the story as a comic or write a new ending and read it in front of the class. This is a reflective task. Look at the textbook or reading resources you use with your students and find a sequence of reading activities and identify which of those activities correspond to pre, while, and post-reading activities. Take a few screenshots of those activities and write a small analysis with your discoveries and justification. Use the literature that has been referred to in this module. The references list is here. And well, that is the end of this presentation. Thank you very much.